This position is really tough for me. I play as white and I have to win, but my opponent controls the entire situation. Yet I managed to outplay my opponent here. And all of that happened thanks to this most powerful rule that I have learned throughout my entire chess career. I'm gonna share it with you as well as show how exactly you can implement it in your very next game so that you finally can achieve your chess goals. I play here knight to b3. My knight is in trouble anyway, and I want somehow to create counterplay. This key thing is to make it hard for your opponent, to have some choice so that the opponent has to struggle finding the right move. My opponent took here on b3, which is not the best move, but that is what I expected anyway, the most active move, capture. Now I'm attacking this knight. She doesn't want to go backwards, so she plays this move rook to d1. Now we get into the endgame. Rook's endgame, very, very interesting and instructive one. It seems like it's absolutely impossible for me to win this game. Yet I did, thanks to this powerful rule that changed my chess forever. I took on a1, and now I find myself in this rook's endgame. How on earth can I play for a win here? So far, my opponent's pawn structure is perfect. She doesn't have any weaknesses. So I have to create it. I have to pose some questions. First of all, I played rook to c4. So my pawn is protected now, and I want to create problems for my opponent. But how can I do that? Well, after king to e7, I'm playing here the move g4. And this is the first serious problem that my opponent has to solve. Well, you don't want to take it, right? You're going to lose your e4 pawn, and the g4 pawn is going to fall next. But what do you do as black? My opponent just played rook to d1 so that she stops me from going into the d file. That is quite annoying, the only open file here in the center to control, but I had a very specific idea. I actually even sacrificed a pawn here, all with the same intention to make it hard for my opponent. So first I take here on f5, she takes it back, and I make this move f3. It seems like it's just a huge mistake, because I allow my opponent to play rook d2 check and then win a pawn, and it seems so tempting. She could not resist from doing that kind of immediately. By the way, we are kind of in the time trouble in this situation, so this is the perfect moment to put additional pressure on your opponent. That is how you win those really difficult games. I'm playing king to g3, and it seems simple at first glance, because she takes on f3, and now this is a very powerful pawn, I have to take it back. And then she takes this h2 pawn and everything is beautiful. But of course, that was not my idea. I just wanted to make it complicated for my opponent. So I play the move rook to h4. And instead of taking this pawn, I protect my h2 pawn, so it's never a weakness, and I attack the h7 pawn. That is not possible to protect. So basically, I create this outside passer. That was the whole intention, to create some imbalance in the position. When you have the imbalance, the pawn structure is not symmetrical, then you have such a higher chance to outplay your opponent, because it's so much more difficult for him or her to take those decisions. And this is exactly what happened in this game. She played the move f2, which feels absolutely logical. You're just threatening to promote the queen in one move. But luckily enough, I have this move king to g2 back, so that f1 is never a problem I can take, and she can never play rook to d1. So basically this pawn is useless. I control it with my king, and it even shields me from the rook, so it cannot create any threats for my king. Meanwhile, I'm ready to take this very dangerous pawn on h7. And that is exactly what happens. She plays rook to b2, trying to create a counter threat, but I don't care. I just take that pawn. She plays king to e6, and I take another pawn on b7, and suddenly the engine still says it's 0-0-0. Like, come on guys, why are you even playing? It's a dead draw. Well, of course it's not, because rook's endgame, even though they have this tendency to be drawish, it's so difficult to play it. But only if you make it that way for your opponent. If you create this imbalance and your opponent has to think, now this pawn is ready to run, how on earth do I stop it? What do I do? How to stop all of those threats? So make sure that you improve your position, and at the same time you create problems for your opponent. You pose those questions so that the move that your opponent has to make is not straightforward. there are different alternatives, and it's not easy to make that choice. This game was played in Munich. Big thanks to organizers of this amazing tournament who made it possible for me to play and share these games with you. She played king to d5, which feels very natural, just to improve your king, push it towards the center. I also made something very natural. I played the move h4. I just want to push this pawn forward to attack and essentially to create my own queen. This is why you have the outside passer. You have to use it. You have to go forward, push and run and run. So my opponent makes the key mistake here. Up to now, it's just 0-0 according to the engine. But humanly speaking, it's really dangerous to find the right move. And she plays king to c4. Now, I really want you to pause the video for a second and try to find the best move for white here. How do I actually use it and win the game from here? I hope you have found it. The move is actually very logical, yet so brilliant. Rook to d7. I just cut the king away from all of the most important actions, which are happening on this part of the board. You might be wondering, what is this magic board I use in my videos? It's called Chess Not Evo. And I enjoy it so much, I have it for a year now. It completely transformed the way I play chess and I train chess, because I can play both on Chess and chess.com online, but on a real board. It's a completely different experience and I enjoy it a lot. I haven't had any major issues, and that's my favorite product from Chessnut, because I have everything in one place. I have my books here, I have my studies here, I have my games, but they have so many different products according to your needs and your budget. The best part is, of course, you can use the link in the description as well as the promo code journeytograndmaster to get a big discount on all Chessnut products. Now, back to video. So this was the key mistake that my opponent made. It felt logical to her to attack the pawn, but now the king does not participate. Moreover, she cannot take that pawn, because thanks to this outside passer, all of the pawn games are just automatically winning for me. The pawn just runs and the king has no way to stop it. So after king takes b4, I have rook b7 check. After rook takes, I have rook d4 check. In all of the cases, the king is just too far away from this passer and I promote. And so what do you do as black? But it's not end, because surprisingly enough, I made a huge blunder here and lost all of my advantage, even though this position is completely winning. So she played rook to e2, a very logical move, and I'm going rook to d4 check, just defending this pawn because now it was hanging, and again catching the king, so it seems like it cannot do anything. What should be the logical step? Try to pause the video and find it yourself if you want. Meanwhile, I'm gonna reveal my mistake here. So instead of just pushing h5, which was the correct thing, but I was afraid of this move, f1, king takes, and then rook h2, and then I didn't want to lose this pawn. But in fact, I just shouldn't worry about that. That gives me a completely winning position. I have played rook to f4 because I wanted to control this pawn with my rook, and now I'm ready to push the pawn and then take rook takes f5 just to defend it if needed. But that misses the crucial part here. You never make a move unless you have thought about your opponent's response. And you always and always start with the most active opportunities. And here, there is only one way to make a draw for black, but of course it's sufficient. King to d2, the most active opportunity. Now, king to e1 is a huge threat. It turns out f1 is threatening with a check, so like h5, she goes king to e1, and I cannot stop the move f1 at all. In fact, this position is completely lost for me in just two pretty logical moves, because f1 is coming if I play king to g3, still f1, and she's in time to stop my pawn and I lose the rook and the game. You can say, come on, you can just grab this pawn and the entire problem is over. Well, it's not exactly the truth, because after rook takes, yes, if she takes, she is lost, but she has this absolutely mind-blowing move, king takes e3, just attacking my rook. The rook is pinned, so I have nothing else except for taking it, and then king takes, and normally I would just win by pushing my outside passer. But now this f-pawn is so powerful, and if I push my pawn, I'm gonna even lose, because she's gonna come with the check and destroy me. So I have to repeat the position with king to g3 and king to g2 back That would have been a devastating ending to this game. So remember, it's never ever too late to spoil your game. Always be very careful with your opponent's counterplay. Fortunately for me, she just took the pawn on e3 instead, but that is such an unimportant pawn if there are still rooks on the board, and this outside passer is so much more important. So I took it with the king, and it turned out I'm just completely winning, kind of immediately. In fact, was so funny. We were in the time trouble, and so she played rook h3, and I immediately played king to g2. And then I'm like, wait a second, couldn't I just play rook to f3 check, exchanging those rooks, and the game is over immediately because I have this outside passer that has nobody to stop it? I mean, that was absolutely fascinating, and then I was so devastated, but then I noticed, okay, hold on a second, she has no way to avoid the rook straight, because the rook is hanging, and there is literally no square to go except for d3 and e3, and that still allows me to exchange the rooks immediately. I mean, probably the rooks endgame is also winning, but if you can transform the position into a winning pawn endgame, this is always and always what you should do. And that is the case. Outside passer always gives you the victory because the king is simply not in time. Well, she played king to d4, trying to at least stop that pawn. And after h5, king e5, she's still in the square, but I just have the move king to f4, and I can follow the king through king to d5. I can take the f5 pawn anyway, just blocking this king completely, and then the pawn runs and promotes into the queen. So this is exactly how you outplay your opponent from an equal or even a worse position. You make it complicated. You try to ask as many questions as it's humanly possible. And sooner or later, because your opponent is not a machine, he's gonna start making mistakes. But make sure to focus on the counterplay, because it's never too late to spoil your chance. In this video, I share with you the most important strategic principle in chess that completely changed my life and made me an international master.